Hi, I'm Lisa. You guys want to introduce yourself?
Mahan.
Hi, James, Windon.
So we got a brief introduction just now to your project. You're not saying a ton about the actual product itself, but tell us what you can about your vision for what you're doing.
Sure, yeah, I'd be happy to. Thanks for having us. We're really excited to be here. Can you all hear me all right? So? Okay, I'll speak up a little. So, as was just mentioned, James and I founded a company called Brigade, which is really focused on tackling what we see as a kind of declining system of representative democracy in the United States and many other kind of leading democratic countries, where I think you'll see we've seen a huge decline in participation rates, particularly in local elections. Am I off? Am I on now? Okay, great.
Had nothing to do with my.
Figured that was off, yeah. Huge levels of cynicism and apathy leading to declining participation rates in, in elections. And we think that at the heart of this is a fundamental disconnection between voters and society. We basically do not have a very robust civic life in society today. People don't have a strong identity as citizens, aren't finding places to come together to share information and make decisions, and therefore are unable to hold their elected officials accountable. And so we think that the only solution to that is to build a technology platform that connects voters and empowers them to act collectively. Do you want to add more detail?
That's fine, we can move on.
So connects voters and empowers them to act collectively. Can you tell us anything more about what that means? I mean, does that mean that they're going to organize around a specific issue, share their thoughts, share their feelings?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think I'm off as well. No, I'm on, apparently. Okay, there we go. I think fundamentally what we've seen is that at the moment, no existing consumer-facing network or platform provides the information or the context for people to have robust, potentially public discussions around the issues they care about. I think earlier, when we chatted before, leading up to today, I think you mentioned the pretty robust sets of discussions around Hamas and Israel earlier this year that were playing out on Facebook. And I think that as many of those as we saw, I don't think anyone who got involved in those discussions on Facebook had a particularly good experience. It was something akin to a gladiator fight where they'd argue with each other on a comment board and a whole lot of people would look on and potentially not weigh in or potentially weigh in a negative way. So I think, yeah, for us it's about providing context and information to help people connect with like-minded individuals.
So how does tech solve that? I mean, is there something specific, something about the way that our networks work these days, about the way that we're able to connect with people that will help with that?
Well, I think I'll take a stab and add to it. I mean, I think over the last decade or so, we've seen increasing comfort with having an online identity. And that really became mainstream with Facebook. Facebook was really the first platform that got to a scaled online real identity for now over 1 billion people. And obviously there are a number of other products out there, networks out there. Another one we pay a lot of attention to is LinkedIn. And so part of our theory is that as people became comfortable expressing their private, personal, and kind of social lives online through products like Facebook, it then became fairly natural that they would want to extend those kinds of experiences and conversations into a professional network like LinkedIn or AngelList, and there are other examples out there. We think there's probably this emerging third area, or so we hope, or we're in a lot of trouble, which is your civic identity. What are the other things that you that you feel a responsibility to be involved in? And I think it's kind of a logical progression. I think most of us we're very, as technologists, very practical about what they really want and need. And I think it's only natural that this third sector would be lagging. But part of our theory is that people do want to be engaged. They want to be good citizens. They have a stake in society, and they know that, and that we need to provide an identity platform that helps them express that part of who they are, and then form connections with the friends and neighbors and other people who share their values, so that they can actually plug into the political system in a productive way.
But one thing to note on that is it's although it may be a new digital type of behavior, a new normalization of digital behavior, it's a behavior that's always gone on. And in many ways, it's actually declined. In the 20th century, your social life and your civic lives were intertwined. And so it's not the notion that people have never been willing to have these discussions, find like-minded individuals, act collectively. In fact, all that's happened is that's just declined over the last 50 odd years or 100 years, and it hasn't manifested itself online the way those other two networks that Matthew alluded to have.
And you feel that people will be comfortable about sharing their opinions, their beliefs, their causes online. Go ahead.
It's a great question, and we've thought about this a lot. And actually, just in our informal research of just kind of getting out and talking to people, what we've found has been very interesting. Everybody's immediate reaction to the word politics is one of aversion of, well, it's not really something I necessarily want to talk about or associate myself with. There's the old adage that you don't talk about, what is it, religion and politics in polite company. And yet, when you reframe the question and ask people, what do you care about? Is there an issue that you are worried about? Is there something you're frustrated or angry about or inspired by? Everybody has one or more issues that they can talk about. I mean, speaking from our perspective in the United States, at least, whether it's climate change or immigration reform or tax policy. I mean, it's just an endless list of things that people are frustrated about and want to do something about. So I think if you meet people there, you can engage them.
And if you're running for office or if you are looking to get involved in the political system from either an advocacy organization, what does your vision for them entail? I mean, how would they be able to engage with your platform?
If you're an organization?
Organization or politician,
Or
someone sort of on the other end, as we talked about.
I mean, I think it's important that you bring up both, because I think often when people think about the space that we're tackling, their mind immediately goes to elections, and we think that's an important component of the democratic process and the civic experience for our be our end user. But we think that there are other tranches of the experience that we need to focus on. One of them is exactly that, the rules-based, regulation-based legislative cycle and all of the advocacy work that surrounds that. We believe, particularly I think given our background, the work we did at Causes, we believe that there has to be a role for professional organizations on our platform. If you look across the spectrum of organizations, politically and charitably, from, you hate to use the tax codes, but it's actually a pretty useful way to divide them up. The 501c3s in America are the charities, the C4s are the advocacy organizations, and then you have all of these other things which are PACs. All of those organizations play an important role along with others like trade unions and associations. For the organizations, particularly the advocacy organizations, I think what we saw on Causes was that professional organizations have a level of sophistication and can deliver a level of value and offline impact that a lot of amateur organizers simply can't. They don't have the resources at their disposal, they don't have the sophistication or the strategy behind their campaigns. So we will be providing a place for them to exist on the platform. What that looks like, we're still working out. For political candidates and officials specifically, I don't know, do you want to speak to that? I don't know.
Well, I was going to say, yeah, for both organizations and candidates, and I hope this doesn't sound too grandiose, but I think there's an opportunity for Brigade and other products like ours that are really native to the internet to move them from a kind of top-down list-based model to more of a network model where you distribute responsibility and power and you actually place more trust and capacity in your supporter base. And so whether it's a campaign, somebody running for office, or it's an organization trying to gather support for their advocacy aims, part of what we want to do is kind of return power to individual people, which on an individual kind of atomized basis probably wouldn't work. We'd all kind of be out there alone holding our own sign. But if you can actually help people plug into a larger whole in a place where they can meet as equals and actually act collectively, I think we'll start to address this huge imbalance that we see in the political system today, where there are really well-funded campaigns and big centralized organizations, advocacy groups like the NRA, who we've spent a lot of time talking to, has moved from being really decentralized, and they're still pretty grassroots, but they have a huge office in Washington, D.C., and they send tens of millions of pieces of mail. And it's not just them. This is the Sierra Club. This is almost any big organization. They've become very, very centralized, but that doesn't deliver a great experience to people. That's not what average citizens and supporters want. And so we think that part of the future is building out a platform that actually kind of spreads that into a network where that responsibility can be shared.
So here's the sort of far out question then. People originally, when we started to share online 10 years ago or so, we sort of built up these profiles of ourselves and we weren't really thinking about what exactly we were doing with the information. And I think right now, and especially in the US, people are starting to wake up a little bit more to that. issue of how much of myself is online, how much data how much data am I sharing with companies, data being just personal information, and what kind of profiles are being built up about me? What access do companies have to my whereabouts? I mean, as we just saw with Whisper, even if you opt out of certain location services, IP addresses can be a way to find you or basically figure out what, more or less who you are. What kind of promises do you make to users starting out?
It's a great question. I think a fundamental point to make here is that with any of these products, there's an explicit or ideally explicit give-get relationship where you are giving up a certain amount of privacy. You're putting a certain amount of information into the system because there are certain benefits that come from that. And I think we need to be really explicit with people about what those are. So if we know that you're a registered voter, or we know what you care about, or we know what district you live in, we don't want to know that just for the sake of knowing that. We want to know that because we can then deliver certain benefits to you. We can help you figure out where the best advocacy campaigns on the issues you care about, or the candidates who are most aligned with your views on the world. And so that exchange of value needs to be really explicit. I think there's a lot of concern around the abuse of that data, and I think one of the things, it's still very early for us, so it's something that we've got to kind of work through, but as we talk about potential down the road in a year or two monetizing, and we think about advertising as a potential way of doing that, the nature of that advertising would be that we'd really want it to be aligned with why people are there. And so again, going back to why we would have that data in the first place, if we're helping you connect with an organization or a candidate who actually represents your views, then in fact we're providing a service to people. And so I think it's easy to be to throw up your hands and say, well, I don't want anybody to know that information about me. This is really sensitive stuff. This is like who I am and what I care about. And we get that and think that's really important to listen to. We hear that from users now as we're just doing interviews and early research. But the advantage here is to get that information in the system so that we can then help people do productive things with it. And so there's a trade-off there between privacy and better forms of engagement that we can supply to people.
But I think that's all right. I think particularly in the space we're in, one of the big problems we're solving is an information inefficiency problem. And rather, providing people with an encyclopedia, to the extent that they exist anymore, an encyclopedia information about politics and their role in them isn't useful. So it is a matter of giving up information to receive value back. Having said all that, we're really cognizant that the information that we're potentially going to be dealing with is prickly. It's scary, and it's important for us as a company to take it seriously. One of the steps we've taken in that direction is we've created a cross-functional privacy council. So this is a council that sits between product design, engineering, and all of our non-technical folks. And that's for us to take a step back and think from a very normative level, from a very proactive level, what is our stance on privacy? And the nice thing is we haven't launched yet, so we can have a good think about what is the information we want to be collecting, how do we want to be dealing with that? And to your question, what are the promises we want to be offering our users? Mm-hmm. Far too often you get caught in this sort of reactive spiral where you're simply trying not to do the things that are considered, worst case illegal, best case just bad practices. We want to come at this a lot more whole cloth. And first of all, ask not what information are we allowed to have, but what information do we need to deliver value to users.
Where do you see this particular debate going post-Snowden, post-Occupy Wall Street? The history of political organizing and the requirement for anonymity, frankly, is, you could see that throughout the 20th century in Germany, and elsewhere, in China. Where do you see this heading in the future?
I think...
specifically about anonymity. And sorry, let me just preface that by saying, are we going to be using our real names on Brigade?
Yeah, we think it's important that people are there with their real identity as I'm a citizen, I'm a voter, I live in this neighborhood or in this city or state. I think that is you actually being a real person and a verified citizen and or registered voter is also a part of the political system. I think it is, there's a reason that the ballot box is private, and it wasn't always. In the United States, at least, it used to actually be a public vote in like a pub, right? And they went to a secret ballot box to reduce the kinds of coercion and other and obviously in other countries it can be much worse, right? People's lives can be at stake. But That being said, I would also argue that on the flip side, all of the great movements of history that have led to greater rights and freedoms for people also came out of people stepping up and saying, I believe this, I think this is right, and putting their own kind of identity and person on the line there. And so we're not asking people to put themselves in harm's way, but I also don't think you can have a robust civic life and democratic country without people actually speaking their minds and getting out in the public square and saying where they stand on things. And so it's a balance. We're not going to, part of what we will not be launching with, I can guarantee you, is any kind of public official vote, in part because government isn't open to that anyway. You're still filling out physical ballots in the U.S.
That's off the roadmap?
That's off the roadmap for now, I'm sorry.
Yeah, bad news. I mean, I think the other thing is that, to your point, every country is different. And I think we often get asked, are you an international platform? When will you get to my country? The reason we're starting with the US first, albeit a platform that will be, accessible across the planet, is because we acknowledge that every country is different, has not only different idiosyncrasies from a business perspective, but has different risks and risk profiles from a user perspective. So I think we just need to be very careful about, as we roll out richer functionality in different jurisdictions, what risks our users have in those jurisdictions that are different potentially to those in the US and other Western countries.
And do you want to talk at all about some of I know you've gone and met with some organizations and politicians. You talked about the NRA. What interests them about the potential of this platform?
In general, at least what I think, what I've been hearing is real excitement that there's an opportunity to unlock this vast potential in the electorate and citizenry. There are a lot of people out there with capacity that's just untapped. And I think that whether you're talking to politicians or nonprofits or advocacy organizations, what you find is that they're kind of operating in a world of diminishing resources. Yeah. They have lists with really high churn rates. I think now in the US, the average is 16-17% turnover on their email list year over year. So they're spending more and more money to acquire names and email addresses to put people on their list, and then they're kind of top-down hammering those folks for money or votes or whatever else they need from them, and then nearly 20, a fifth of them are turning off the list within 12 months. And it's a bad model, and everybody knows it's a broken model, but an alternative hasn't emerged. And I think, I was kind of referencing this a few minutes ago, there's an opportunity for Brigade and products like ours to build a networked approach where it's really, people are there taking those actions voluntarily and organically because they see real value in doing it. And so what we want to do is expand the pie. We want to get more people to participate and participate more deeply. And that's a philosophy that I think every candidate and organization we've talked to has loved. They said, from the perspective of an elected official, for example, I'm not saying this is quite necessarily what we're doing, but if as an elected official I were able to look at my district, let's say for Congress, you have about 800,000 constituents in your congressional district, and 50,000 or 100,000 or 200,000 were in the same place, and we knew what they cared about, and they were proactively engaging and saying, this is what I think about this issue or that issue, and they were figuring out how they were going to vote, or they were pooling money and saying, this is where we're giving money to the causes we care about. Having that sort of renewable resource of a network of people who are bringing together resources and taking action because there's a social norm around it and because they're there with their friends and their neighbors and it's actually a meaningful experience for them is a game changer. I mean, it really, that's an overused word, but it completely changes the model for elected officials and candidates and nonprofits who today, again, are operating in this world of diminishing returns.
So a politician will be able to look out and see, kind of a profile of their constituents, what they care about, what they're active in, what they've been giving money to, et cetera. Where does that leave the people who aren't able to get online even? Where does that leave people who aren't able to marginalize, the people who are poor or can't afford a smartphone or don't engage or don't speak the language?
I mean, yeah, that's a fair point. I think, I think the risks associated with building a technology platform that doesn't include people without technology are obvious. I think that, hopefully I would say the cost of smartphones are going down. The product that we build is going to be, easy to use, easy to access. It shouldn't be wonkish. the way that we're hoping to aggregate, or more importantly, disaggregate power shouldn't actually lead to those who are wealthier having more influence on a platform like ours. In fact, it's the opposite. We're reading an article in the Times this morning saying that, over breakfast, saying that, this year there will be more money spent in the midterms and there will be less votes than ever turned down. Which, if you think about it very rationally, if you're a politician spending money in the political space, you are now spending more and getting less, which is literally the worst business model of all time, if in terms of having a provider who delivers you goods. So for us, I think votes have become more expensive. Like it or not, that's the state of the political sector. What we're trying to do, in one way, is make votes cheaper. Not necessarily by having people pay us and we can deliver them more, but by churning up a lot of organic growth and getting people voting more often, more regularly, in a more informed manner. One thing just on the question you asked a moment ago in relation to the organizations and their reaction to our platform, I think it's worth commenting on the role that Facebook's played in their strategy over the last 5 years, because I think it's been a massive disappointment to most of them. I think and we saw this early in the Causes days, I think a lot of nonprofits saw in Causes, what was then one of the early Facebook applications, an opportunity to have this philanthropic application built on top of the Facebook graph. And for a range of reasons, Causes did very well, and then likely we were able to move that into Brigade.
Do you want to give like a one sentence on what Causes was?
Yeah, sure. Causes was one of the first applications built, actually in the very first May 24, was it? Maybe the date, let's say that. Yeah. May 2007. May 2007 when Facebook launched Facebook platform Causes, back then called Facebook Causes, was launched. And it was a product that allowed you to create and join causes with your friends. These were online communities of people, and then ultimately donate to any nonprofit in the United States. About 700,000 people created these online communities. About almost 200 million people used the product over the last 7 years. We raised about $50 million for charity. So it was sort of one of the early social fundraising products, social community products. But I think what ended up happening was a lot of particularly nonprofits and advocacy organizations sunk a lot of resources into building up their fan pages on Facebook. And what's happened is, over the last 2 or 3 years, as a rational business actor, Facebook has decreased rapidly and aggressively the organic distribution you get to your Facebook fan page, which is terrible news for these often very small nonprofits who've spent a significant amount of money trying to build up this asset, and now they can't reach them through feed. So I think that coming out of that experience, there's an acknowledgement from a lot of our organizations that, to Matthew's point, the model of simply building up a new list on a new platform more cheaply is not the right model anymore. Originally it was direct mail in the 60s, 50s, I don't know when it was direct mail, 50s, let's say that. Then it moved to direct email, and all that organizations did was take their offline lists and turn them into online lists.
And make sure the subject line just said, hey, so you'd open it up.
Yeah, hey name, yeah, if you're really advanced.
From President Obama.
Exactly right. Yeah, well, I mean, we can talk about that in a moment. And then they created other lists. They created Twitter lists or Facebook lists. And all those things did was just allow for cheaper publishing. It didn't ever leverage the potential of social networks. The potential being that all of a sudden you can change the messenger, which I think is the big thing that we're interested in. We don't need organizations to be pushing top-down messages to their supporters. What social media should allow for is peer-to-peer interactions, and everybody knows that when a friend asks you to do something, it's infinitely more powerful than an organization asking you to do something.
So I guess off of that, and this might be my last question, I think we're running out of time, but why can't Facebook, with all of its resources, just simply create another platform for this?
I think it doesn't match real well with the context that you're in when you're on Facebook. Facebook is fundamentally a social space for sharing and celebrating life events with friends and family. So whether it's birthdays or baby photos or celebrating an engagement or the pictures of you at the party or on the beach, that's the stuff of Facebook, and that's what draws people back. Trying to layer in a civic experience that's rich, that's focused, that offers a fair bit of functionality for people to do things together, just seems to be at odds with that fundamentally social experience. And I think the same is even more true on a platform like LinkedIn. So we really believe there's space for a different kind of network that's focused on a different set of relationships, different kinds of conversations, and ultimately a very different engagement model as well.
I would just Sorry, do we have time to add one thing or not really?
Yeah, sure.
Let's add one thing really quickly. I think
might ask
one
you
of
to ask another
I
question, but-
I think two reasons. One is I think they have earnings calls, which I think means that they need to focus on the business model at the moment. I think the other thing is that the chasm between what is available online and the type of platform that will facilitate and allow the kind of discussion we're looking for is too great. Like right now we know, I think it's 80% of people, Pew Media did a research a couple of weeks ago, actually it was a couple of months ago, I've been saying a couple of weeks for 2 months, that said, 80% of people are willing to discuss politics at the dinner table, but 14% are willing to discuss it online. So obviously right now there is a gap between what platforms are available for people to have political discussions at the moment.
I mean, look at the anonymous comment sections of newspapers. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's another issue, but that's an identity issue. Anyway, so I just think that, to be honest with you, even if they decided there was a business model and they wanted to sink resources to it, they would have to shift the context that is Facebook right now so drastically to facilitate and enable people to have those discussions. I'm not sure it would work.
I guess, are we going to be seeing advertising in the future from a politician that's targeted at me? Hey, Lisa, I know that you donated to this, or I know that you're interested in this, or you liked this. Here's my platform on it. And is that a bad thing or a good thing?
I think we're still working that out. I would think
whether it's Brigade or elsewhere, I mean, it's going to happen.
Oh, I think
right?
elsewhere, 100%, yeah. I mean, whether it's us, I'm not sure. But I think to Matthew's point, our guiding principle in any of these things is making sure it's accretive to the user experience. If that's a good experience for you, if matching you with politicians, organizations, and friends and neighbors who share your values is a net positive experience for you, then yeah, we'd love to do that.
Okay. Any questions? Throw it out there. Yep.
So if that's a huge success, like Brigade is a huge success, why do we need representatives? Why do we need, in the end, congressmen to represent us if we can decide ourselves?
Just to repeat the question for anyone listening online, if Brigade is a huge success, why would we even need congressmen? I mean, some people say we don't need Congress, but...
Well, to offer a perspective from California,
Yeah.
I think direct democracy has its challenges, and maybe there's a way to make it work, but at least from the experience we've had in California, when you kind of break down all of the big decisions and just put them out in front of the electorate and say, make a decision, I think it's, and maybe there are creative solutions to this, but it has tended to be the case that people have always voted consistently for more services and benefits and never voted for increased taxes. And so you end up with huge unfunded liabilities, really bad decisions, and it just, I think, the reality is it's complex stuff. We actually just did an event at our office the other night with our team where we went through the voter guide with everyone. We went through the roughly 50 decisions that Californians face in the election happening today. So from candidates to all of the ballot props at a state level and then down to local levels, you're making about 50 decisions. And just trying to get through all of that with our team was a huge headache. And even at the end of it, we didn't really feel all that well informed. And so I think there's a reason to outsource some of the work to people who are focused on it day in, day out and have a background in it and spend years focused on these issues. I just think we've outsourced too far. We've basically outsourced it to the point where we're just not even involved anymore and we have no idea what decisions are being made and how they affect us.
I'll take another question until someone stops me.
So I'm wondering if that's actually the paradox here is that there's lots of people who are very politically engaged who want to project a message, and there's a lot of politicians who have to make very tough decisions, and there's in a strange way there's a natural dishonesty because they can't necessarily want to give bad news. I'm wondering if that's the opportunity back the other way, is how do politicians educate the masses around the real problems so they get a real mandate to tackle those problems rather than always being the yes man and saying, guess what guys, we're never going to raise your taxes this year. Because fundamentally you're going to consistently have that problem in California where people aren't going to want to take the bad message and you're never going to solve the problem. So is that the solution? The solution is maybe the other way. How do you educate people better on a mass basis?
Yeah, I think it's a great point. One of the things we talk a lot about is facilitating a better two-way dialogue between constituents and their elected representatives. And today that's just completely broken. You find a web form, you try to fill it out, you get a form letter back, and that's the end of the conversation. And so yeah, you're right. There is no good channel through which to deliver bad news and show people the bigger context of the different trade-offs that are being made. And that's something that if you have at scale a two-way communication platform between electeds and constituents, you would hope would be something that would be able to begin to tackle. I also think it's to your first point, part of the challenge is, and we didn't really talk much about this, is the power of concentrated money in the system. It's not just that there are some people who are participating a lot and a lot of people who aren't. It's that because there's this money game where the cost of a vote keeps going up, it's effectively more and more expensive to get reelected every cycle, you're just naturally going to become more responsive to the 0.1% of the electorate that supplies all the money for the campaigns, because that's your lifeblood. It's just like we pay attention to our investors. They give us the capital to get the company off the ground. Of course we're aware of what they care about and what their values are. Same thing happens to politicians.
Or, I mean, it may not even be that self-selecting, right? It may be the case that it's not necessarily that someone's in office and changes their mind based on where the money's coming. It's simply that the person with a particular point of view that reflects the will of those donors is the person. Yeah, exactly. It's the money primary that begins the whole thing. That's right.
One more? Great.
One more.
Hi, you guys talked a lot about connecting like-minded people. Is there a risk of echo chambers kind of being created through Brigade where everybody's just listening to what they like and they don't?
Wasn't this the last question that I asked you on our phone call?
Yeah, that's right.
We got cut off
that's
at
a
that
good
point.
question.
Funny how that happened.
Yeah,
Weird.
it's body connection.
Technology. I mean, I think echo chambers are problematic when I think that they are the loudest voices, they sit on the extremes and they discourage political participation from other people. I think connecting you on if you create issue-specific echo chambers, which is a really weird way to frame it, I don't think that's necessarily a problem. I think people will always be drawn to other people to share their views. I think as long as we're ensuring that people can have disparate views that aren't necessarily bifurcated based on party lines, for example. We were discussing last night, the rise of the socially progressive, fiscally conservative American, and I don't know which party they land in at the moment. And I think the risk with polarization and echo chambers is that those people actually get pushed out because they don't feel like the existing noise centers reflect their worldview. For us, what we're trying to do is ensure you can connect with anyone on given issues. And as long as you're doing that in a way that doesn't discourage participation from others, I don't necessarily think it's a problem.
Great. Well, thank you guys so much for your time.
Great, thank you.
See you at the website.